Hand this off to Mike because I need to go take care of an issue at the hotel. And so Mike, basically the history of this, we met at the combine. And we were talking. We were talking, and I was looking for a topic, and Mike suggested this topic, so hopefully you guys can get some benefit out of it, and we'll go from there. So let him introduce everybody and go from there. Thanks, Chris.
Morning. While we're filing in, I'll kind of delay a little bit because there are a lot of C students about to arrive. And myself being one of them, I just happened to have to get up earlier. So the gentlemen from Exos, Steve and Ted, as you guys know full well, have decided to agree to join me, and I brought Van from Adobe. Real quick, how many of you guys actually cut on Adobe? Okay, so about half of you. FYI, in the booth later this week, he'll be raffling off some subscriptions to Creative Cloud for free, as well as donations at the Vegas night thing. So Van's actually a fantastic gentleman for them. He's their business development manager, and you guys will definitely want to talk to him, because one of the things we're going to get into, aside from the coach's video and the 4K and how that actually is not just student only, not yet, it's actually here and usable, and the Exos guys can show you that. That's what we're showing here. But on the other side, as you guys are finding out that the production side of your job is becoming more and more important. I mean, you guys would agree with that. Oh, one guy raised his hand. Oh, okay, yeah, I guess then I agree with that too. Okay, cool. So that's kind of where this kind of all comes full circle. So just as a manufacturer myself, I do a lot of presentations on this stuff, and I realize that, all right, let's understand our audience here. I'm not going to actually give you guys 30 slides of stuff. So what I am going to do is try to get to a common denominator. How many of you guys are familiar with 4K? You've all heard of it, right? So a quick question, is 4K in RAW, or is that something that can be encoded in a camera? How do you actually get 4K video? That's why we're doing this. Okay, so I'm just going to give a few slides real quick, and then we'll kind of get, this is going to be very informal, kind of roundtable, stand-up roundtable discussion. Really, it's an hour to provide you guys some information and then open the floor to ask extremely bright people from the industry that help you, well, and then myself. But this is really for you guys, and please ask questions as they come up, okay? There are no dumb questions, only the ones that I ask, and I'm actually talking but not asking questions other than, what do you guys know? So, you took it up there. All right, okay, so since we're all here to kind of wonder about what 4K is going to be, we'll advance the slide. Okay, I'll just stand here.
I'll do it.
That's okay. So, what is 4K? Now, this right here, I'm just going to give you a quick example based on resolution of the variances from, or advancements from standard def to high def to what may be perceived as 4K, because there's one thing that's really important you guys walk away from here understanding the difference. The difference is you are all not John Kabatic. Okay? Therefore, you got here earlier. You guys are a little more respectful of him, but he is now a man, given the fact that.
This is why I shoot Panasonic. Thank you.
If you want to win an award, you shoot on Panasonic. But nobody ever got fired for shooting Sony. All right, so what is 4K? Standard definition, 320 horizontal pixels by 480 lines or 486 lines. If you match that up pixel for pixel, then you have another version of HD, which is 720, 1280 by 720. Can everybody see that okay, by the way? Should I jump down? The next step for what's called full HD is 1920 horizontal pixels by 1080 lines. Now this is what you guys are, well, half of you guys are shooting in for your exchange, 1080 or for the NFL exchange, they chose to go with this at a little bit of a higher data rate. So this is full HD, and this is 2K. How many of you guys have heard of 2K? Okay, a lot of people actually shooting 2K. If you go to the theaters, about 85% of what you're seeing in the theater now to this date still is 2K. And what's important to understand here is that the difference between HD and 2K is only about 7%. 7% on the horizontal side. So if you look here, you see 2048 by 1080. That's 2K. It's a 17:9 aspect ratio. What is the aspect ratio of full HD or even 720? What's the aspect ratio? 16:9, right? Good. 2K is not HD, they're different. You would shoot 2K for a theatrical application, you would shoot HD for a broadcast application. Okay? The next one is UHD. UHD is kind of an all-encompassing term. It's basically anything that's above high definition, going up to 2K, I'm sorry, going up to quad frame HD to 4K and beyond. There's going to be UHD 1, UHD 2, which will kind of be a quad version of UHD, but this is actually 4 1920 by 1080 frames collective, give you Ultra HD. So if you look at it, it says it's 3840 by 2160. If you take 1920 and multiply it by 2, what is that? 3840. If you take 1080, multiply it by 2, what is that? 2160. So you actually have HD, 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 HD to give you an Ultra HD frame. Sometimes referred to as quad frame HD, but it's been replaced as a standard reference as Ultra HD. This is not 4K. Ultra HD is a 16:9 aspect ratio. This is what you would shoot in for a broadcast application. This is the native resolution of that panel, which is freaking out at the moment. Yes. Oh, okay. So yeah, good example. Very timely of it to do that. But what we're actually displaying here is actually an Ultra HD frame. Where even though the consumer companies that I work for in the Panasonics of the world, whomever, LG, Samsung, they claim them to be 4K sets. At the consumer level, they are not 4K. They're Ultra HD panels. The reason why is because the aspect ratio is still 16:9. You can't just, okay, hey, we'll have these millions and billions of dollars developed into these panel production facilities. And I can just change it to 17:9 panels and have to pull everything out just to make new panels for this 4K. So they kept with Ultra HD and 16:9 panels, they just built out a lot more resolution in them. For theatrical applications, that's where that other 7% horizontal that takes you from 3840 and moves you over to 4096, that is actual 4K. Now, that's not to say that you guys should not be shooting 4K at any time. You can if you want. Bottom line is, if you have aspirations to do something for a theatrical extraction, and there's a lot of, how many of you guys have done any film study where you understand the extraction ratios, 133, 185, 239, those kind of things? Well, CinemaScope, those are all extractions that can be done from a 4K frame, 4096 by 2160, okay? So it's important to understand the difference between UHD and 4K, because if you're going into an editing session, or if you're delivering something for a group, you want to make sure you know the difference between a 4096 4K and a UHD 3840 export and aspect ratio. And that's kind of what this is. So that's what that is. Any questions on that? Again, no bad questions, no wrong questions. So what does it give you? I'll just call it out really quickly. And this is applicable now for Coach's video, which we'll get into with Ted and Steve, and the use of 4K. The idea that you can zoom in on a 4K frame and see whether a lineman's basically giving away, leaning a certain way on a play, little things that you can pick up on. A lot more capability with that in 4K. But it's important to understand that UHD, okay, we're not talking 4K, but UHD is 4 times the resolution of 1080p. It's 9 times the resolution of 720p. It's a big difference. So think about that. How many of you guys watch NFC on Fox? Okay? So you're watching Fox, you're watching the Aikman crew with Buck and Aikman, whatever. They use that super zoom technology. That's a 4K camera that's actually zooming in, and they can zoom in multiple 100% and not even be breaking down the 720p video that they're actually outputting to the broadcast network.
Mike, so this is your UHD, and that's your 720 that you guys shoot today.
On a pixel per pixel mapping. This would be the native resolution of 720. This is the resolution of Ultra HD. So if you think about that in a couple of different applications, Coach's video, certainly you can zoom in 6, 7 times and not be breaking down 720 output for an exchange or whatever the case may be. It's got some benefits to it. In a production application, if you're doing your motivational videos, any of those things, having stuff, let's say if you've got the next, top draft pick, all right, we're gonna wanna start doing some player profiles. You may wanna consider doing that stuff in 4K to have it on the shelf, to not only have it on the shelf to be flexible with it, perhaps it could be something you can monetize, something that can be used somehow, even if it's just for the player himself. Say, hey, remember when we did that whole thing, each other in 4K? Let me make a donation to the program or something like that to get a copy of that, depending on the relationship you have and how that actually would work. But more importantly, it's flexibility. So you have the ability to zoom in, the ability to cut out. It gives you a longer shelf life of this stuff. Now, is this stuff affordable becomes the next question. And that's what we're actually showing here is what is being shot here with this test that was done last year at Georgia. Was actually done on a cloudy day, first of all, but it was shot with this camera down here. This is the Z100. This is a $6,000 camera at list price, which means for people in this room, it would be a little less than that. So it's absolutely affordable, and it's actually here today. A couple other cameras we have up on the table there, something called the FS7. It's under $10,000 that can record as encoded video. It can also go RAW, but it's important to understand that shooting in 4K doesn't have to be a raw recording, which then you have to manipulate in post, and then you have to debayer it, and then you turn it into video, and that becomes a bit of a process. Now there's some in the community that do that all the time. Some that actually are not in attendance at the moment that do it well and do it quite often. But it's a different situation, different program. Perhaps the money is a little bit different in a different school. Bottom line is that 4K, a good way to go is, can it be encoded to a manageable file size? Is it affordable? And more importantly, can you edit that? And that's what we have Van from Adobe here for, to say, look, any of these formats, whether it's Sony cameras or Panasonic, now they have some 4K cameras available now. Some of the other camera manufacturers, you can record in these formats, and that's great, but if you can't edit it, you're looking at a lot more work. On the Adobe side, one of the great things about Premiere is that you can pretty much take any file format, drop it in the bin, and cut away. No transcoding, no logging, capture stuff, right? It's just easy, it just goes in and it works. One thing I want to show you guys real quick, because have you guys heard about 8K? And I don't mean 8K solutions, I mean 8K video. There are people talking about it. 8K, obviously 4K is still, a question mark for some, but 8K is probably going to be used in broadcast in about 6 years, 4 years at best by certain countries, but it's a ways away. This is important. I was doing some homework on this, and if you look at this from a visual perspective, this is what the human eye can actually resolve. And if you're looking straight on, you can see up about 50 degrees in the typical human being's eye. Up about 50 degrees, down about 70 degrees. Left to right, 94 to 100 degrees. If you take that into consideration, what the human eye can discern in terms of color, now your color angle of view is much less, 25 degrees down 30 degrees. That's where you actually can derive color, from 50 to 60 degrees. This is your normal line of sight sitting. This is your normal line of sight standing. This is the part that really got me. If you're measuring what the human eye can resolve back through the retina, you can actually only see about 18 lines per degree of what you're physically able to view. If you multiply that out, it comes down to horizontally, in color, you're only able to see about 1,900 lines, or 1,900 pixels across. And then, 1,900 lines vertically, and 3,000 roughly horizontal pixels. In terms of what's physically viewable, this is the actual, the resolution of what you can derive. So if we look at these numbers and we look at the 4K stuff, if we have 2968 vertically and 5600 horizontal pixels across, this is a little bit more than 4K, right? It's basically less than 5K. The point is this is kind of like visual vitamin C at this point. Anything above this, your body just kind of throws out and it just rolls off. So this is pretty much the top end of what normal eyesight can resolve. Now, there will be a few people that can, I can see 8,000 lines, fine, but most people can't. So the question is, do you need more than 4K? 4K is pretty much the sweet spot in this case. Okay? I mentioned vitamin C, and you can go up to 8K. It's just like taking a ton of vitamin C. Just with this, you just won't get nausea, diarrhea, and stuff like that. So this is something that's really important to understand, because when you guys are making decisions on this, is what can we afford? How's it going to impact the program? And is this something that can be flexible? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. Is with the camera solutions that are available today, you can be recording 4K inside the camera as encoded video, not having to deal with RAW, but also potentially take a live output to an HMR10 and get your exchange stuff for practice and games. And then, by the way, when the game's done or practice not being done, you can use that same camera perhaps as a production camera for post applications. Make sense? Okay. So go ahead and shut that guy down. So, who would like to start off? Ted? Everybody know Ted over here and Steve over here, which I almost screwed up. That's great. Who would like to start? Because I would like for you guys, if you can, explain your special sauce and how you're actually taking this compression scheme, and what we're actually looking at on this 70s display is a second generation of content. So even as good as it looks, it actually is a second generation. So,
well, first of all, this is the camera footage. We didn't recompress it in this case. So it's the 150 megabit H.264 UHD 60 hertz. In this case, we're not recompressing yet. But so one of the nice things about the media player inside Thunder, the Hemi media player, as we call it internally, is we were always built around long GOP content. And this is just another long GOP flavor. So really the main limitation we had to overcome was processing power and memory, because the frame size is big. It takes a lot of physical memory to hold enough frames to be able to play back smoothly like you guys are used to seeing. So it's a 64-bit port of our player to give us more memory. And then we're using the Intel QuickSync technology to provide the video processing. So if you look at the CPU load on this machine, it's about 20% while we're playing back this video. And you get good remote response because we can decompress the images very, very quickly. So I think, Ted, if you could show them kind of some of the zooming that Mike was talking about, it might be a good thing. I mean, Mike mentioned the acuity of your eye and the inability to really see anything above 4K, and I completely agree with that. Especially when you get, if you're looking at monitors where you're looking at a much smaller degrees from your eyes. But I think from a coaching perspective, zooming is very important, and being able to zoom up to 9 times and still get 720p resolution, I think is very important to coaching.
You get detail of this, that where it breaks down in the HD compression, this is going to show you finger placements instead of a blob. You've got such fine detail on the blocks here that you really do get where is the finger position on the ball, where is the hand position, is he inside the shoulder pads, is he. The details that the coaches can now pull out is not going to be limited by, you saw before, when I zoom in 9 times, I'm back to an HD picture, right? You zoom in 9 times on HD, you're well past SD. You've only got 4 times zoom in HD to get to an SD file, and then it just turns into blocks. You can't tell any details. Here, this is an end zone shot from, right, how far away are you in your stadium there? You shot this end zone for us. 500 yards away probably for these guys at midfield. I mean, it's a pretty good sized stadium you've got there, so this is a nice long shot. You could potentially, one of the things that, as you're looking at it, is you could shoot a wide end zone and lasso a tight end zone out of it, potentially. Do the same thing with silent, so you wouldn't have to do multiple cameras potentially if you wanted. Let me shoot it wide and I'll take the tight copy out and just, we'll create a HD file out of that kind of thing. So there's a lot of flexibility to what you can do with this content. But the detail, you're just not going to break down. So your coaches are going to be able to find any detail they want to see that you're just not, you're limited to on the HD. HD is great. The HD workflow, I would almost argue, is better than the HD picture quality. When we went from 25 megabit down to that 6 or 8 megabit, we're at 20 times ingest speed, whereas 8 to 9 inch estimated was the max of standard depth. Going to UHD, it's about 50% slower. So it's not, you're going twice the time you were with HD. It's not terrible because they're doing a lot of stuff with the newer cards. What's the new memory card called now?
The card that records to is the same. The FS7 uses the XQD media. Yeah.
And we're limited on the PC side by USB 3. I know that when you go to like Adobe, you're playing with, on the Mac side, you've got Thunderbolt. You got Thunderbolt and you can bring it faster, but still, it's not destroying. It's not like we're going back to tape by any means as far as workflow. You have better quality, like Mike said, you can shoot. Honestly, if nobody wanted to do anything with 4K this year, a lot of you guys should still consider it, because if you don't acquire it in 4K, you can never go back and get it, right? So if you plan on 2 years from now, we're all gonna be 4K, great. You may wanna show all the games, only use the HMR10 content off the back of this guy, and then just put this on a shelf. You know, go buy some hard drives. That's all I did during the game, because we had to get the content before Steve could build it. So all I was doing was copying these cards onto a hard drive, writing down the times just to figure out, you know, what would the time difference be. But it's not expensive to store this stuff around. Again, you know, we basically had 10, 12 grand worth of cameras is all we need to do this test with. And Steve could go back and build all the engine to get the sucker to ingest and play. So it's a very interesting, we see where everything's going, right? The compression, when you looked at this 3 or 4 years ago, what's the raw size, like 900?
The raw, so if you're looking at uncompressed HD video, which would be just 1920 by 1080 at 422, you're looking at about 1.3 gigabit per second. Multiply that times 4, you're over 5 gigabit per second for uncompressed UHD content. That content is being compressed down to either 600 megabit if you're doing 60p at intra-frame encoding, or in the long dot encoding, which is what this is 150 megabit, so it's a quarter of the data rate. And then, as Ted mentioned, the new readers that are Thunderbolt and USB 3, they can actually read up to 330 megabytes per second. So if you compound that in this, it winds up being a negligible difference in terms of the speed of actually bringing this stuff into post or into your exchange situation. But what you get is a lot more flexibility for the future and for the media.
Yeah, I think having this stuff on the shelf, even if you didn't use it right away, is very important. I mean, new compression technologies are here now. We've got HEVC, where you can get arguably visually equivalent, to this bit rate down in the 50, 60 megabit per second range. So now we're getting down to some very relatively low bit rates that can be very high quality. I've actually got some HEVC stuff on this machine that we can show later that, you can demonstrate with 720p, 4 megabit HEVC looks comparable to 8 megabit 720p now. So you get some real compression advantages there, but if you don't have the pixels to start with, you're never going to get it back. So I think it makes a lot of sense to acquire and keep the 4K video.
Now we'll come back in a second, but one thing I want to convey here, thanks guys, is if we look at the difference between feeding something that's actually already shot in 4K versus something that's HD, don't care about that. So, no, that would be HD as well, but let's look at this. This is, thank you. So this is stuff that was shot on Sunday. And this is stuff, how many of you guys in the room either have an FS700 or have worked with one or whatever? Okay. Really? That's it. Come on. Thanks, guys. That's the whole pod of 700 users are great. Thanks, guys. Everybody just raise their hand, come see me later for a gift. So this is, the value of this camera is it can do high frame rate. This is something that can also, in pinch, go down and be shot in 1080i6 in the Exos format if desired. But for production purposes, this is 240 frames a second. And now it's a $6,500 camera, and this was just with a stock lens. This is recording to SD cards, but we're feeding HDMI in at HD. This TV set is doing something called upscaling. Upscaling in engineering terms is actually a bad thing. But in the marketing terms of 4K technology, the idea that you're actually increasing through processing inside the panel, you're actually kind of basically line doubling to create a much more vivid, much more pure, detailed signal. So even if you have well shot high definition stuff, your TV sets may do the upscaling, and you're gonna see more tools on the editing solutions that actually have some, that was my cue that, hey, that was a good shot. But you're gonna see a lot of different things, but this still looks pretty good, but it's not as good as it could be. So that's kind of the concept of upscaling. Now, any questions relative to what Ted talked about or what Steve talked about? Did you guys, because I want to make sure that we're getting something out of this. And certainly Van is here to answer any questions relative to your post applications, right? Any of the stuff that you guys are doing for motivationals or anything. But the technology is something that we it's not just, oh, it'll be here soon. It's actually here today. How many of you guys know somebody or yourselves, because we're all rich in this room, right? That's why we're doing this. Have maybe a 4K set at home or in the coach's office or anything like that. Okay, cool. All right, well, it's pretty much everywhere else. Now, the reality is that you guys binge watch stuff, right? You're not just dragonflying shit back and forth with each other, right? Off the cuff, you're saying, hey, you know what? Rather than doing that because somebody recorded this stuff off DVR or whatever, okay, I'm gonna actually stream it on Netflix, or I'm gonna stream it on Amazon. They actually have Ultra HD services that you can stream if you have a TV set like this. And we'll have this back in the booth, and if you guys want to see, we can pipe this into the network in the conference room and physically just watch some 4K stuff being streamed into here using nothing other than the TV set. It's already here. So House of Cards, all these different shows that are actually acquired originally by the Netflixes and the Amazons, they're forcing acquisition to be at 4K. HBO is requiring new original programming to be at 4K. Discovery, even for reality shows, is requiring 4K because they need stuff to feed the content. And there's a big window of opportunity for monetization of this content. Quite frankly, in all those production environments, if they're not shooting something in 4K, they're already behind the point, as what Steve and Ted mentioned, is that you kind of need to start building up your B-roll library, your stock footage, anything like that to embrace this because it's already here. And you guys have always been, honestly, a little bit faster to adopt things and be a little more nimble than the big brothers at the Shield because they're just in a different situation. You guys can be nimble, you guys can be dynamic. And that's why we're kind of doing this here because the time, quite frankly, is really now. You can certainly do this in a very affordable camera like that, or on a production side with something like this. These guys both record in that same long dot 4K or Ultra HD codec that's 150 megabit for all this resolution and all that flexibility. So for post applications or a B camera in post or your game and practice camera, this is basically the same solution. And in both cases, it's a simple, take the HMR off the back end of the SDI, capture that while you're recording UHD or 4K internally, and now you're golden. And nothing really changes. You just bring more hard drives to back up the stuff off the card to protect that content and go forward. So I want to make sure that Van's actually getting some interaction here because he's taking the time. Again, he's going to be in our booth, and you guys can ask questions then. But does anybody have any post question or a production question? Because Van actually doesn't just, he's a huge sports fan, and he gets this stuff, but he does a lot of stuff in the TV and film circles as well. So he's got a lot of knowledge he can offer, not just sit here and be a pretty face and a huge type fan. Did I hurt you in that? Sorry, yes?
What are the specs on the laptop? It's running 20%. Is it an i7, 16 gigs of RAM, or a 32?
Great question.
This is actually a desktop, so it's running, I can't even remember what it is. The main thing is to have the HD graphics and a 4K output. It's really not taxing the CPU much, but you have to have the HD 4600 or better graphics chipset from Intel. And you've got to have, the hardest part for this was actually getting the 4K out at 60 hertz, or getting UHD out at 60 hertz. There was like one graphics card on the planet that would do it at the time when we set up this machine. It's an NVIDIA card. It's a 960 GTX. We're not using any of the shaders. We're not using anything fancy in the card. We're just using the HDMI 2.0 out. So we're still kind of a little bit at the cutting edge, but as the spigots get bigger in the laptops and you get HDMI 2, the CPU can handle it and the silicon can handle it.
Yeah, actually, we shot the first half at 60 frame, the second half at 30 frame, just because the 30 frame was like 75, I think it was half the size. So we did try to see, how small can we go, just like we do with the HD stuff. We know workflow, you guys can't get the content fast enough for the coaches. But everybody is so used to HD 60 frame, the 30 just felt flickering. And you actually saw as you pause frames, you get a lot more motion blur with a 30 frame content than you do with 60. So we pretty much rejected the 30 frame outright just because of, it just didn't hold up anywhere near as well as the 60. Now that, like Steve says, that really restricted us today on what cards can output. So if you just have it in a laptop and you're playing on a laptop, you can do it. The output, the full 60 frames, because it displays, was our gotcha when we had to go over to a desktop just to get the video card.
Now, if you've got DisplayPort, that works great. But most of the devices would be your HDMI 2 or HDMI 2. So.
And that's actually something we should make clearly understood, because that is a confusing part. Now, if you guys want to get a kind of a layman's kind of walkthrough on Ultra HD and 4K, Amazon actually has a great kind of tutorial site. And one thing that it calls out is the differences, because if you want to watch their services, you have to have a TV that can support it. The differences between HDMI 1.4 and 2.0. This is actually massively important for you guys to understand. How many of you guys know what HDMI 1.4 and 2.0, the biggest difference is? How many of you guys know what HDMI is? Okay. How many of you guys have heard of HDCP? Cool. The handshakes, right? Probably run into that, try to hook up a monitor. Why is this not working? Well, you got one version of HDCP. It's not interacting with this. We're not shaking hands, therefore the signal's not passing. HDCP 2.2 is what you want. HDMI 2.0 is what you want. HDMI 1.4 has a limitation. The biggest limitation in this application is that it can only pass through 30 frames of Ultra HD. And that's where you run into the issue there. So be careful, and this is a note you're going to want to walk away with. If you're going to invest in solutions, whether it be cameras or a display to actually see this stuff or even degrade it, you got to make sure that if your interface is going to be HDMI, it's got to be HDMI 2.0 capable, because at that point, now it's a future-proof technology because there's all these different streaming engines that are coming out and devices. A lot of the older TVs that came out were 1.4 HDMI and therefore could not see a 4K or UHD 60p signal. That would be a huge problem, especially if somebody went, hey, I got this cool 50-inch display on eBay or Best Buy or whatever, I got it for like $2,000. Look at this, hey, cool, coach set up great. Coach is all fired up, let's hook in this stuff that we shot, won't pass. What's going on? 1.4. Don't want to run into that situation. HDMI 1.4 is something you want to avoid like the plague. If you're going down this path, it's got to be HDMI 2.0, and which inherently will be HDCP 2.2. Okay, that's really important. All that actually is pretty clearly laid out on the Amazon site and walking you through why that stuff is important. Yes?
Okay, so I get the shoot it now, edit it now in post with your tools easily.
And the point is if you do that, if you choose to edit stuff now versus just like archiving and shelving, well, shelving it because hard drives is not really a good hard drive or archive, but if you cut stuff in, then you can save the melt and toss everything else that you don't need. So that would be a way to be efficient at that point. Yes.
So, but I get shoot it now, edit it now. When do we edit it in coaching? When does UHD play nicely?
So
No faults?
right now, because 150 megabit, we've got heavy playing this sucker right now. Your network to do your 28 concurrent clients, everything that's qualified on your network to play for all these different clients is actually qualified with 25 megabit standard every time. The 25 megabit is all that matters. When you try to go to 150, your switches are not set up to push out 150 megabit to all those clients. Now, because of this, the work that Steve and the development group did with ThunderCloud, where we can play on your same Thunder client, you can play the 8 megabit, 720, or 6 megabit AI, or the streaming variation all on the same machine. We can go the other way with it too, where potentially you say, you know what, I want my team meeting room to be 4K. No, I'm not saturating all the switches. I'm just sitting in this one room. And Maybe you surge it locally to that one room if you're worried about bandwidth. But then it's just playing a higher bit rate than the rest of the rooms. You know, just like we play the streaming lower bit rate. We can handle multiple renditions of the same media file. So to get around the physics, until you get to the HEVC, where you can compress this down, like Steve said, it's looking pretty good. We're hoping that when that gets more runway into it, maybe next year this is only 50 megabit instead of 150 megabit. And now you're not going out and buying 10 gig switches everywhere and having to get a 10 gig card off of your servers. And physics is against us right now. So we want to work with field test partners this year to say, hey, maybe we set up a machine in your building, because one, you don't have 4K displays for the whole building anyways. The bigger the display, the more benefit you get from 4K. This small of a TV, that's a big TV, but guys in the back row, if we played 720, we played 4K, it's gonna look the same here at that size. When you blow it up, you start to get a lot softer. 4K becomes far more beneficial in those large pictures.
Okay, so did I hear today at 150 with some assistance, with some hardware and switches, that it happens today?
We don't have it all ported into Thunder yet. We're waiting for Dub Partners or somebody basically ask us to do it. The media player is the same media player that we use in Thunder. And the remote's hooked up. You can come up here and play with it later if you want to. So it is the Thunder media player. We've not done all the integration work yet into Thunder. Don't think that's a lot of heavy lifting, but we're kind of waiting for someone to ask.
So like a year from now?
It depends on when people adopt it.
2 years.
So the limitation is not on the engineering side, it's on my business side. My boss, Barrows, so you guys don't know, until I can make a business case of guys are gonna buy this and use it, we're not allowed to put the engineering to finish it up. We've done enough to do proof of concept. He's got the mind share that we're done. To fold it into the release Thunder version, I have to show Matt, I've got a handful of partners that are ready to do it. So we don't want rain code and not be able to field test it. So that's what we're waiting.
The no-brainer out of the gate is for production purposes, right? No-brainer. The question is, can you pull double duty with that equipment for coach's video, right? I'm gonna toggle over real quick just to, oh yeah, there was a question behind you. Got down, held down. You have a question?
That was the same thing, I was saying file size,
Okay.
because after that, doesn't seem like realistic that you, I mean, obviously for archive, but not currently.
I'd really hope to show you guys HEVC 4K 60, but I can only do it at about half the frame rate right now with my setup. So I've actually got HEVC support built into this version of Hemi, so I can play back HEVC content, but can't quite keep up with 4K yet. So I need to do some more optimizations.
Just so you guys can see kind of what more of a kind of, I guess, a produced piece might look like. The value of 4K is not so much, you know, hey, look at this and this. It's trying to make something immersive. And those of you that have actually seen 3D on like a TV set at home, and quite frankly, unless it's being driven by a set-top box where you get an actual HD side-by-side or HD being provided stereoscopic, it usually didn't look good, certainly in broadcast, because you'd be getting standard definition side-by-side, anything but immersive. The point of this is so that you are not necessarily watching it from here. The point is you can watch it from here and still not see a single pixel. There's so much fine detail that when you're on the couch in a screen like this, it's like you're at the movie theater, and it's truly an immersive experience. So it's not just the back end zoomability and things like that, which are also great side benefits, but you get way better color, way better dynamic range. And you know, cameras like this, these are like 14 stop dynamic range cameras, which basically means that if you're shooting in the dark, you've got a lot of sort of latitude to work in, not in the dark, but if you're shooting in a high contrast environment, you're gonna get details in the whites, you're gonna get details in the darks, you're gonna have a lot of range to play with in post. And these displays and the technology allows you to kind of work with that in a more comfortable space. So I don't know what happened here. So,
Can we get a video guy?
So, any questions? Anything else? Another question? Come on. Sure.
What would a projector for 4K cost?
Good question. So the question was, 4K projector costs. Your mileage may vary. There are some on the consumer side you can have maybe $5,000 range on the low end. Although some of the actual consumer cameras that are out there actually have projectors built in. Now they may not be like a huge lumen count or anything like that, but the idea of being able to do that. They can range all the way up to upwards of $100,000 or more, depending on the quality you want. So that's probably, team room stuff may not be the most affordable projectors right now. Now on our side, we actually have a short throw projector that is 4K, it's 50 grand. That would be something for like more of a recruit station or specific to a team room, because you can basically mount it up on the ceiling or up on the ground, and it's like a just box about yay wide, yay deep, yay high, flip up the top, and it's a foot away from the wall, above or below, and you can put about a 100-inch throw on there. So it would be very discreet, and that's actually something that we've sold a ton of for a lot of exposition centers and stuff. But it's kind of a big ticket item, I guess, in certain circles. So they're available, but they're not necessarily expensive just yet. The way that people are going are these, because you can get this for $4 grand, in a number of different varieties. You can get this for $2 grand in some cases. But what do you want to watch out for? Some of those things are going to be HDMI 1.4, so you want to not get that. Van, do you have any questions for them?
No, I mean, you guys covered great points. Whether it's you're preserving the legacy of what you're shooting. Obviously you guys made a really compelling case in Coach's video. That's pretty astonishing to be able to zoom in that much. I think the only other point is talking about price of projectors. The compression now, whether you're shooting RAW or whether you're shooting compressed video, the ability to bring it into a standard laptop, and I can show you 4K on my laptop here, is very real today. So it's great to be on a contemporary computer, but you don't have to go out and buy an incredible amount of infrastructure or systems and high-end systems. 4K used to be extremely expensive. You had to buy $100,000, $200,000 edit bay to be able to come in and do that kind of work. It is very practical today on a standard laptop. I've played with stuff on the plane, and you're actually looking at true 4K on a standard computer. So it's become very accessible. Whether you shoot in RAW, we have tools, as well as other products have tools that you can just right-click and convert into a standard Rec 709 color space, so you're looking at the proper color. It's that simple as a right-click, or whether you're shooting compressed video, again, the ability to just load all that in, have instantly right off the card, right into the system, playing back 4K on a laptop is really powerful. It's incredible to see how fast that's all developed, and that's beautiful images that you guys are creating on this side.
So yeah.
So in the world of production, I'm a self-taught avid guy. I know that cool stuff takes time in the world of Avid. In the world of your products, does cool stuff 4K take time? The renders, special effects, stuff like that. It is for me, I coordinate my going home, having a meal, around, I'm going to let this render out. Is that the same experience with Adobe customers in Premiere?
It's a great question. We've done a lot of re-architecting of our software over the last few years, really heavily investing in the core architecture, so that on, again, more contemporary computers, we'll use the graphics card to accelerate processing, or multiple graphics cards that ship into standard computers. It is more pixels, and there's no getting around the fact that there's more math to do. But we're seeing a very realistic export times as fast as real time on good computers, much faster on really heavy duty computers. So it's become really quite practical to work with in that sense. In some cases, you're shooting 4K, and that's just what you want to preserve, and you're going to take that and flip it to 1080 or 720 or whatever you might use. Maybe it's 264, it's going on the web, or it's going on a tablet, or whatever you're doing with it. But again, it's having that, I look at my parents' photographs, which I'm really glad to have that legacy, but they're black and white, they're this big, and there's no detail in them. Just being able to shoot at the highest resolution and make sure that whatever you're going to extract from that, you started with great quality, but it has become very workable today, again, even just on the laptop, to work in those kind of formats. It's not tripling, doubling, quadrupling. Your picture quality is quadrupling, but the time it takes to process it is not.
Down conversion, for instance, to do a 720p or 4K to 720p down convert is about 2x real time with this PC using the Intel QuickSync technology. The 1080p is about the same. The 4K to 4K is a little higher, but to do down conversion for rendering is very, very fast. And that technology is getting better every day with the NVIDIA and the Intel QuickSync technologies and ATI for that matter.
And although I have Van from Adobe here, it's not to say that Van's product is the only one that actually works in 4K. So Avid certainly has 4K support. You may need to, if you're dealing with RAW, you may need to go out through Resolve or something like that and round trip it back into it to Avid, but you can AMA all of these encoded formats right now with current versions of Avid in 4K. So it's absolutely doable. And a reason why I brought Van in here is just because from a price point up until Avid announced at NAB that they're basically trying to compete with them from a price point standpoint, the seat licenses of Adobe is next to nothing. Wow. Subjectively, right? And speaking of which, those of you that will be going through the booth, I know you guys got to get your signatures for the booth visits, whatever, for tickets and all that stuff. But we'll have some raffle stuff, so make sure you bring in business cards because you can drop it in our booth. As I mentioned, Van will be raffling off some subscriptions to Creative Cloud. We have a 4K action cam, which is like our version of a GoPro that will also show some footage being shot. But those cameras can do 4K, can do high frame rate HD. Same thing with this guy. By the way, this here is a $10,000 camera as you see it. And this can encode 4K. It can do high frame rate just like the FS700, except for this can do it 180 frames a second continuously. So an entire play, including the hike, including the catch, including the touchdown, including the celebration, including the crowd reaction, all that continuously up to 180 frames a second on this guy with a super 35mm sensor. Who brought you? So, yeah.
Another question?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I had a question. I hope I asked it right, but when we, like in post-production, when we work with 4K and Avid, we can take, I link it AMA, I have the 4K file, I'm playing it back in a 1080 project, I'm able to zoom in, which is awesome for post purposes. For Coach's video, it seems incredible as well. Will there be an option in Exos, like can you, I guess, import a 4K file and then say, like, we just moved into a new facility. We have a 4K TVs like in the video office, but in our Coach video offices, we want to have the 1080p TVs. Like, can you import that 4K file, and then will you be able to play with that 4K shot on a 1080p TV and be able to zoom in? And even though you're not really watching it in 4K, you're able to zoom in without losing the resolution. Is that?
And the only way you'd be able to do that is keep the native 4K resolution. We can certainly resize it to 1080p to play back on a 1080p set. I was doing that before the TV came in this morning, just checking out the hardware. And the zooming you'll get the zoom capability, so the pixels will all be there when you zoom in. So if you zoom in 4X, you'll have every pixel on a 1080p display. So that's certainly something we could do once we've got full support for it in the product.
Mike, is there an icon? Is there an icon that goes with the 1.4 to 2.0 so we see the TV? Sometimes they
Yeah, that's a good question. So on the packaging for televisions, they're trying to, the Consumer Electronics Association is trying to basically get like I think they're calling it Ultra HD 4K connected or something like that. That basically tells you it's like their stamp of approval. On the sides of those boxes, you will see in some cases whether it is HDMI 2.0 or 1.4, but in most cases, it's, I behoove you guys to kind of do your homework to find out exactly what it is, because it may not, they may try to say, hey, well, we need to get these out there, and they're already 1.4, so we're going to kind of try to hide that back. I've seen some of our older sets that didn't have anything mentioned, and that's, people got burned by that.
In the post-production workflow, if I build a 4K project, I bring my 4K footage in and I want to spit out a 720p video, am I better off doing that at the end, or should I take my media and make it 720 before I build my project? It's a great question, and I get that from Hollywood professionals as well as sports teams. And a lot of times for me, it depends. If you, again, are processing a lot more pixels, you're doing a lot more math when you're working with 4K. If it's something that you're going to turn around quickly, it's great to have the benefit of bringing it in at full native resolution. If you are going to, the most important part, if you're going to do any framing, insert any graphics, zoom in, those kind of things, you're going to want to start with the full quality as we were just talking here and making sure that everything's laid out correctly and you can flip it to the end. If it's something you're going to be working, you're creating a highlight reel, something that you're going to play inside the stadium, you're going to spend a lot of time building this project and want to work on it and get it done quickly. You may want to down convert it to 1080 so that you're lightening the load that you're working on your computer. So there isn't a right or wrong answer. To me, working in the highest resolution is great. Again, if you're doing framing, graphics, and things, then you want to make sure all your scaling position is going to transpose correctly when you bring it down to other resolutions.
One other thing that's really helpful, we talked about zooming in and the flexibility in post. If one of these cameras for motivation or whatever is being shot on the sidelines and running handheld, obviously there may be some shaking from time to time. When you're acquiring 4K, you can actually crop that out and do some image stabilization. It's a pretty standard feature in a lot of the different editing systems now to basically stabilize that image as part of your export. You convert to 1080, 720, whatever you wind up using, and that's become pretty commonplace now. Now some of the cameras have it built in too. It's in some of our cameras, but maybe you're doing a sit-down interview and somehow the boom mic is in the frame. Okay, we'll crop that out. That's kind of helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, it gives you the ability to shoot wide and then crop into the action wherever you want to make your highlight.
Now, I don't know if you guys have ever thought of this. Certainly in a high 50 or something like that with an all 22 shot, in theory, you could shoot something, or maybe in a practice camera, right? Up on a set of sticks, shoot it all 22 wide, and then you can basically just potentially go in and post and zoom in and do your specials, right? You kick that stuff around. Sit down interview with a player profile or a coach's video show or coach's show or something like that. You can have a 4K camera here. You have talent, interviewer, whatever, wide shot, zoom in for a one shot, zoom in for one shot, zoom in for a two shot. You can basically make it a 4-camera shoot with one fixed camera that you're not even doing anything other than hitting start at the beginning and then stop at the end. Again, flexibility of what it can do for you. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. This guy here, when you're talking about low-cost ways to utilize this technology, low-end cameras like these guys, not low-end, but I mean, and by the way, this camera here is the baby brother to the F55, which is a camera that's used on a number of different features and shows like the Blacklist and stuff. This is a camera that can record in the same formats. As I mentioned, this whole rig here, right around 10 grand. And the way to get the files off there, you bring them into a reader that you can come in USB 3 or Thunderbolt, bring it into your post solution, turn it around. You can export your melt and throw it into this guy here, which is a $3,000 4K player that can do 60p 4K or Ultra HD. Slap the card in there, play it out. So this could be something that could be either outside of a team room or it could be something that's just sitting there, maybe in the coach's office, say, hey coach, here's what I'm thinking of showing. You just bring this as your projector player, and then it just goes into the TV or whatever you're physically using in that environment to show that video. So, I know there are a handful of coaches that have sets like this in their office, whatever. This would be a simple, consider this to be like a 4K Blu-ray player that you just walk around with and just play the footage out. Because it actually has 4 SDI spigots. You can go into a broadcast display as a quad frame Ultra HD or HDMI 2.0 into your set that does have HDMI 2.0 to get your UHD or your 4K 60p content. Very inexpensive. So $3 grand here, you figure whatever size display, anywhere from you figure $1,200 up to $5 grand for some high-end display, or you can go into a 4K projector in a team room or whatever. Very inexpensive way to go. And solutions like Avid, like Adobe, they can simply just take those files, export them, convert them back to the codec on the card, and play it out. Doug, I know you got a question. Offline. I guess that's pretty much it. So do you have any following closing arguments? Anything else you want to add? Bottom line is that a lot of this can be taken advantage of today. We're excited about where this is going and what can be done. At least, first line of order is coach's video, right? But as is up and coming, to bring more eyeballs, to get more money being brought in by alumni in for the program, whatever, video is the way to do it. Bagby from Clemson will be talking later on. Last year at Atlanta, basically he spoke at CSVS talking about, hey, you know what, if you want to basically bring eyeballs on the attention on the program, you got to do it through video. You guys know about that, but that's where it's going. The 4K direction with not just Sony, but also the other manufacturers that have these tool sets are available to you guys to take advantage of today on the production side, and very, very soon on the coach's video side.
Thanks, Mike.
So that's it. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.